All right. Everybody, welcome to the Bridge Fellowship. I'm so grateful that you would join us this morning. If you have your Bibles, it is Matthew chapter 5. We're going to take a little bit of time before we get there. As Jared said, we are a church that has our core values and our family traits, and one of those being we want to be a church that is outwardly focused. That oftentimes churches can be, especially as they grow, y'all, like drift is subtle, churches can become a little bit more consumed with what happens inside, and although that is important, we must never forget that we are here to reach those who are outside the walls of the church. That's why we exist as a church. We want to love and care for those, especially who are vulnerable in our area, that we can walk alongside, love, and care for. Now, that being said, I've always hoped that we could partner, especially with local organizations in our area, that we can love and walk alongside. And thankfully, as a church, we have partnered with 3 organizations. We have, over the last year, been developing this partnership. We've partnered with the Vault Fostering Community. You've heard more, even our shoe drive and that sort of thing. The South Texas Alliance for Orphans, we've partnered with for over a year, and also Hill Country Daily Bread. I hope you've heard about these organizations here in our area, but as time goes on and these development, or rather the partnerships have been developed, we're seeing Bridge people being raised up on these teams to really do great work in these areas. Today, I'm really excited because we get to commission out our very first local missions team. I want to give you a little bit of context of how this works and what this team does, but Tiffany Dixon, who you saw on the video, she's been working diligently for the last 8 months putting together a team of Bridge people who serve as leaders through Hill Country Daily Bread, but as they team up with the Bridge Fellowship called the Bridge of Hope. What this team does is they organize and carry out a food distribution every other week in our warehouse at the Bridge Fellowship, providing 2 weeks of food for every client Hill Country Daily Bread assigns to us as the Bridge. Each week, every client is prayed with, they are seen, they are valued. Relationships are made, and these guests become our friends. I just saw this. We've had 2 distributions in our warehouse. This was on Thursday, where we had 7 cars come through, and I watched our team deliver this food to these cars. And it opens up an opportunity for a relationship and a conversation. I watched our people stick their heads into these cars, pray with people, talk with people, how's your family, that sort of thing. The goal is for each of these welcomed guests to be paired with a mentor from the Bridge. As the mentors connect with these guests, and they ensure they receive their food and pray with them, often the genuine love expressed from that relationship leads to sharing of the gospel and even an invitation to Sunday morning. They've been training for months. They've been working for months, getting ready for months, outfitting our box truck so that it can provide these kind of things. And y'all, we can just say, right now, Hill Country Daily Bread has given us 7 families. We have 7 families that we're walking alongside, not only providing food for, but mentoring. We have more room to be raising up more mentors. We hope that one day we can have many, many, many more that we're walking alongside and helping. There's ways for you to be involved in this mission, and we want to kind of show you the team, and then I want you to be able to go talk to them afterwards. But here's what I want really more than anything. After they've prepared for this long, I'm going to invite this team to come up, and I want them to come stand up here so that you can see them. I want to pray over them, especially as we begin this new season of ministry at the Bridge. But this is our Bridge of Hope team, as they've been working for the last 8 months, being trained in how you love and care for people. And now, hopefully, this will be our leadership team that will develop even more people if you feel called, Lord willing, in just a little bit to help with this. Would you give it up for our Bridge of Hope team? Yep. What's pretty cool about it is this team, they didn't just sign up last week and then jump up here. They really have been working diligently for 8 months, being trained. Whenever I walked in on Thursday when they were doing their distribution, you should have seen how hot it was in the warehouse. There were just sweat everywhere, but they were loving like Jesus. They have poured and invested for 8 months, time and energy, work, and now we're beginning to see these families come to the Bridge, to our warehouse to receive their food, but more importantly, receive what we would say, and I don't mean to be, funny, but like the bread of life. That's what ultimately matters, because we care deeply about the needs of those around us. We care even more about the spiritual needs, the reality in our community. And so what this does is it starts a relationship, and they have worked diligently for so long. And so what I wanted us to do is just take a minute and just pray for this team. We're going to pray for more people to be on this team. But as you kind of consider just stepping into conversations that maybe you're not prepared for, I want to pray the Lord would give them words to say in all of their conversations, how to love and care for well each different situation. But I also want you to have their faces in mind as you continue to pray for how we love and care for the people around us. Would you pray with us? Father, I thank you so much for those that are represented in this room. Father, who would say yes to your calling to love and to care for those in our area, especially, Father, those who are in the most vulnerable of situations. Father, I pray that through this team, you would call many out of poverty, Father, out of the devastation of just not knowing what happens next. Father, I pray that you would bring provision and healing. Father, would you build relationships? And Father, as a food distribution happens, knowing that it's food that ultimately will expire, Father, I pray that there would be gospel conversations that run deep, that there is a well that they can draw from that has eternal water and food that never expires, which is in you, Christ. Father, I pray for provision in conversations. You'd give them gospel conversations, that your light might shine bright through them. Father, I pray for more to come alongside to be mentors of those in our area. Father, for those who are in really hard situations, that the church might shine bright. Father, I thank you for Hill Country Daily Bread and how they walk alongside us, and we get to walk alongside them, only building up the body. Father, I pray for provision, protection, and great conversations. Father, I pray that there will be years from now that we'll look back and see incredible fruit from what you've done in and through this team. Thank you for this opportunity. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Church, would you give me one more big round of applause for this team? Thank you all. Really appreciate you. I woke up this morning and I just thought, man, I get to pinch myself that we get to be a part of something. I've always dreamed that we'd be able to be a part of something that's making a difference in our community. We're starting to see it happen, and I'm just so excited about it. And here's why I really want us to celebrate this milestone in our church's life, the last week of our series in Next. This is the last time we'll be talking about, sort of in a series, the next series concerning the building, and here's why. We care very deeply about the discipleship that happens in here. We care very deeply about what happens in children's and students and groups. We care deeply about that. But we never want to forget that we exist for those who are not in the room yet. We exist to see others come to know faith, come to know Christ in faith in this church. We want to be a church that exists to see a gospel movement that reaches every person, no matter their background and no matter where they're coming from. And so here's what we've looked at in this series of Next. If you, maybe you had one of these books when you came in, you may not have, but you can go grab one. But the way we framed up these 4 weeks in Next is I wanted to show 4 numbers. The first week we looked at the number 1, and that number represents one person coming to faith for the very first time. That's why we exist. That there is someone who is far from God and close to you, and you are called to reach that person. It's not necessarily just you come to let them hear me talk. It's you get to engage in this. We looked at Paul. As Saul, he turned to Paul, but he had someone around him named Ananias that God called there. And Ananias went to Saul and prayed over him, and he received the Spirit. And that's what we're called to. That every one of us has someone in our life that we are supposed to pursue, and that's the number 1. Now, here's the deal. We know this. Churches can get pretty weird, y'all. I don't know if you've been around. They can be weird sometimes. They get caught up in all kinds of things that at the end of the day don't matter. This is one thing we don't want to lose track of, is there is one person who needs to hear the gospel, and that's why we're here. There is one marriage that needs to be restored, and that's why we're here. There's one prodigal that needs to come home. That's why we're here. It's always one. It's always one baptism. It's always one person getting connected into a small group. We are passionate about the one. And if we ever become not passionate about the one, we do not need a building, because we need to be looking for what God has in front of us. But then we talked about the facility. Week 2 was the number 40. And when you look, especially in the Old Testament, what that number represents is generations. That generations are poured into. We looked at Deuteronomy chapter 6. We saw that the Shema was for families, for the church body. And we looked at C.S. Lewis's quote that said that we grow, all of us, no matter your age, we grow in twin gardens, that of the church and that of the home. And as a church, we want to be passionate about the next generation, that we raise up the next generation to love God with all of their heart, soul, mind, and strength. From children's to students, to new parents, to old parents, to grandparents, to everything. We want to be a people who raise up generations for the glory of God and the good of all people. And that was certainly true in what we saw, how we designed the building. And then last week, we talked about the number 3,700. That number represents the total capacity of the new facility in 3 services. What I did is walk you through the facility of how we've designed it. And one of our architects said, we shape our spaces and our spaces shape us. And we really wanted to design this facility to look like a home. That when people walk in, they are at home. They are welcomed with open arms. There's a place for you to linger and to stay. We looked at that. And then certainly we put in front of you the fundraising goals. I told you we've not partnered with the Capital Campaign Company. Like, I'm just putting it in front of everybody. And my big ask, this is it, and it's no private conversation. This is it right here. My big ask is that everyone would prayerfully consider what God has called you to do. And then I just want to put it in front of everybody so that on September 15th, when we bring our cards, we can all say, we were a part of this, whatever the number is, whatever that is. If we get to build the whole facility, praise God. If we don't, we'll figure it out. I'm just asking that everyone has an encounter with the Lord and ask, Lord, what do you have for me? And I'm trusting the Lord in that. That's how I'm sleeping at night, because that number is a big number. I just want to put it in front of everyone. But then today, week 4, this is where we really get to the heart of who we are as a church. This is where I want to kind of paint a bigger picture than just a building, and that's the number 25,000. The number 25,000 is what we have researched on Boerne's economic development and the BISD's research. But Boerne proper, the city limits, the population of Boerne is supposed to be 25,000 by the time this building is built. So just in this small section. But then what's fun about it is if you look at 25,000, you go out 10 miles, and the population expectation is 50,000 within a 10-mile radius of where we are. So what's so fun about this is whenever you consider the number of people in Boerne and you consider how small our building actually is. When you consider 3,700, you think, that's massive. Well, no. Don't forget, there's 25,000 people expected to be here. Now, that was 3 months ago. I have a strong suspicion that families around the country are coming in to get their kids in Little League in Boerne. I can assure you of that, right? Like, I promise that's going to happen. So that 25,000 might be 100,000. I don't know. But we need more coaches. Anybody want to start? I'm going to be there. But I never want us to forget. 25,000 people is the number of people supposed to come to Boerne. You consider 50,000 in a 10-mile radius. I think that's what gives us the proper picture of what we should be seeing when it comes to our community. And so here's my goal for us today. We're going to look at the scriptures, and I don't have a big, but I just want us to see this. The way I want to frame today's passage is I want to give us a bigger vision than just a building. I want to give us a bigger vision than just a facility on Ammon Road. Now, is a facility on Ammon Road really important? I believe that it really is. I think, and Bob Thune wrote a book on it, but it's called The Theology of Place. That God has put us for a reason, for a specific season right here in Boerne, Texas. And we want to grow roots down deep that communicates we are here to stay, to love and care for those around us. The building really is that. We want roots to go down deep. We want to have a theology of place of God. You've called us here. This is our time. This is how we reach people from a solid place. I want us to consider that as we consider the community around us, but we also have to realize it's not just the building. The building is just a tool to be leveraged for the mission. The building is not an end to anything. It's just a permanent space for us. As I was getting ready for the Bridge Fellowship, I had a lot of counsel and a lot of friends who were in this room who were walking me alongside. But then there was some outside voices, and one of them was named Kerry Newhoff. If you've ever listened to some of his leadership podcasts, he had something to say one time when it came to church plants, and I'll never forget it. In fact, if you come to my office, I've got a computer screen, and I've got Post-it notes underneath it with all these quotes and scriptures and that sort of thing. But one thing he said that I've kept since the beginning of the Bridge before we ever launched, and he said this: if the size of your vision shrinks to the size of a room that you can fill, then you've missed the church's mission. So if the size of our vision shrinks to 3,700 on Ammon Road, then we've missed the church's mission. See, it's not about 3,700 at a spot, although that's our home. I hope it's great. We have a much bigger vision than that. There are more people moving to this area that we must reach. Our role, personally and corporately, is to love like crazy, to shine the light of Jesus all around us. So that's how I want to frame today. We're going to look at a passage that we've actually looked at before in Matthew chapter 5, and it's the Sermon on the Mount. And if you remember the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus actually preached this sermon in all the towns he went around to. You'll see in Luke's account that the words are slightly different because he went to different communities, and you can culturally make things shape where people are. And so Jesus, in his Sermon on the Mount, what he does very first is what's called the Beatitudes. And the first thing he says is, blessed are the poor in spirit. What that means is, blessed are those who know they can't fix themselves. Blessed are those who know they desperately need a Savior. That's how the Sermon on the Mount begins. It is the gospel, that there is hope for us, that we can't fix ourselves, we can't fix our sin problem, that Christ has done that. And so he goes through more of the Beatitudes, then he gets very quickly, and this is uncomfortable for us, but it's true, he goes straight to persecution. He goes, in this world you will face hardships. Do not be shocked when people don't like you. Do not be shocked when people come against these Beatitudes. But then he turns it. What Jesus does, he says, okay, here's your role. Here's your role in living out the kingdom ethic all around us. And you've probably heard this before, but he talks about salt and light. Now, salt, certainly, we're not going to talk about it today, but salt is a preserving agent that preserves the culture. Like it does something in the culture. It makes it better. It brings taste. It brings life. But then Jesus, which gets my favorite part, he talks about light. Jesus starts using this illustration of light, that we are the light of the world. That together we, as a church, together we personally, we are to shine his light all around us. And so that's the vision of what I want to give us. The way we reach 25,000 or 50,000 or 1 million or 1 billion, it doesn't really matter. It goes back to this, of what we're called to do. So what I want to do is just read the text, and I want to unpack it a little bit, and I want us to pray and see where we go. Probably to lunch. But here we go. Matthew chapter 5, verse 14. Jesus says this, you are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. So if the vision is, I want us to have a bigger vision than the building, I want us to look at this and see, how do we do this in our community? What do we personally do to that collectively we might see the gospel movement go forward? Jesus gives us all the answers. And I just want to pick it apart really quick because this is the most fun for me. He says this, you are the light of the world. A couple of things that should stick out to you. This is really fun. But he says, you are. You are the light. This is what this means is you don't get to decide this. You don't get to vote on this. You don't get to create a committee and decide, are we going to be light today or not? You don't get to say, how am I feeling today? If I have a good day, then I'll be light. If I'm not having a good day, I won't be light. He says, no, you are light. So no matter the situation, no matter the circumstance, you are light. This is what we're called to. Now let's see this from a really positive thing because our culture is really janky and weird. This is actually a very positive statement because our culture loves to demean, to devalue, to criticize, and judge, and Jesus is telling us who we are. If anyone gets to tell you who you are, it's Jesus. That's it. And Jesus says, listen, you are the light. So let that go down deep into your bones. Let that go down deep into your soul. You have a purpose. You've been called by God. Jesus Christ has called you to be light where you are. The thing that I love about Jesus' words here is it does bring us to reality that we have a purpose on this planet. If you're breathing, if you've been called by Christ, then you've been given a purpose. And here's what the coolest part about it is, Jesus does not give an age requirement on this. For some reason, like in this season that we're in before we get back to Bernie High School, it's hard because we have, not hard, it's awesome, we have elementary with us. And so I have to try to think about this all the time. And one of the coolest parts about this is he doesn't say, okay, after you graduate high school, then you can be light. There is no age here. So if you're in first grade, and you've been called by Christ, you're a Christian, you are light. He's given you that calling. If you're in third grade or fifth grade, you've been called by Christ, you are light. You're just as much of a missionary as I am. Your context is a little different. Like I don't walk around your schools, that'd be weird. But like you get to. You get to go love people, look out for people, care for people. Middle school, you get to do the same thing. As you're stepping into sports, like God is giving you opportunities to shine his light all around the place. whether it's in the locker room or it's in the band hall or whatever. Like your world is being opened up. High school students, I believe this is one of the hardest times to live in high school. I could not imagine. Yet, you were created for such a time as this, high school students. You were put in your high school, whether it be homeschool, private, public school, doesn't matter to me. You are placed where you are for a reason. And God does not say, okay, once you leave that, once you're trained, that you can be the light. That's not what he's saying. You are light. And so high school students, you get to start looking for people who are isolated and alone. You get to look for people who are struggling. You get to look for people who look as though they have it all together, and then finally find out once you realize, okay, they don't have it all together. I get to walk alongside them. This is the beauty of the gospel. This is the beauty of the light. We all have this. Now, you just go on, like parents, you are light in a very dark place, which is your home. And whenever you go to work, you're light in a very dark place, which is the business world. Like, we are light regardless of where we go. I don't remember who said it, but we bloom where we're planted. And God has placed you where you are for a reason, for a season. And so we are to shine that light everywhere we go. Now, the question is, what does light do? It's kind of fun when you think about it, but light pushes back the darkness. That's what it does. When a light turns on, it moves really fast. I don't really know how to explain it all, but whenever light goes, it pushes back the darkness, and that's what we're called to do. Friends, I'm just straight with you, like, it's pretty dark out there. It's pretty rough out there. And you might be thinking, well, I think it's harder now than it's ever been. I'm not positive. It's been pretty rough since Genesis chapter 3. It's been pretty hard. Yet, the call on our lives is to push back the darkness that's in the area around you. That wherever you find yourself, you are the light. So some of you might be struggling with where you are in the season you find yourself in. Don't miss, there is purpose in your season right now. God has a reason where you are. And it might be the hardest of circumstances, but in all of our circumstances, he still shines the light, which brings us to a part theologically that's really fun. It's referring to Christ's light that's inside us, not our own light that we hold. Right? I mean, if we honestly think about it, your light is not that bright, right? Like, all you have to do is just take a road trip with your kids and see how quickly your light burns out, right? Like, it's probably by junction, it's no longer bright, it's pretty dim. That's your own light. But the light of Christ in us never dims. I had just one of the, I knew this new in a church our size, but did a funeral yesterday for a 2-month-old baby that we lost in our church. And y'all, it's just the heaviest, hardest situation, right? But I'm not kidding you. There was light in that conversation. There was light in the darkest of circumstances. This young couple, 21 years old, both of them, they had the hope of Jesus. That it does not matter your circumstance, there is always light, and it's not your light, it's his light. You do have to consider, this is how people generally go to it, but you consider the light of the sun, you consider the light of the moon. The sun is what gives, it's the source of light. The moon simply reflects the light. You are the moon, you're not the sun. The sun is Christ's light in us, and we reflect that light that's been given to us. It's the fruit of the Spirit. How do we shine the light? Well, it's the Spirit's life inside of us of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. It is the Spirit's light that we reflect Christ's love to us, and that's how that light is shown. Shined? Shown. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, our light is a reflection of the great light that lives inside of us. So Jesus gives us an illustration. This is what I love. I love it when he gives illustrations. He says, a city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. That if there is a city up on a hill, you can't hide that thing. Like, you can't mask it. It's a light for everyone. Here's where I'm going to use Spurgeon a couple of times. Spurgeon said it this way. I love how he put it. He said, Christ has given us light that we might enlighten the world. God intends his grace to be as conspicuous as a city built on a mountain's brow. Now, I love that because Spurgeon used humor a lot. He said, just like a city built on a hill cannot be conspicuous, he does not want his grace to be conspicuous. We want to show it to everyone. Last summer, we were able to go for a little family trip to Telluride in Colorado. That's my preference. I don't know what yours is, but the mountains are mine. If the beach is yours, totally fine. It's just weird. I don't know why you'd want to go to the beach, right? Like, if you have to put on sunscreen more than twice, Why? Okay, so like you get to the mountains, and it was the first time we've been to Telluride, but one of the things I love about mountains, and I know it's true of the ocean too, but I love about the mountains is it feels surreal. Like especially if you're in the big ones. If you're in the big with, it feels surreal. And so when you look around, especially Telluride, it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like those are actually that big of mountains. It feels otherworldly. But here's what happens. Telluride is down in what's called Box Canyon. And on this side is a giant mountain, that side's a giant mountain, that side's a giant mountain, and then that's like how you get out in freedom, unless you have a helicopter. I don't know, but like that's the only way you get out. But in these three big mountains, that far one over there, there is a waterfall that comes off the top of it called Bridal Falls. And somehow, I don't know how it was, but every time I'd kind of leave, I went to every coffee shop in Telluride because that's my hobby. But I left the coffee shop and my eyes were like drawn to the waterfall every time. It's like there was a laser beam that just kind of went. I was looking for the waterfall. I couldn't help but see the waterfall. You cannot go through Telluride and not see the waterfall. This is what Jesus is saying. That people, as they see us live our lives, they can't help but see Christ in us. They can't help it. Like they're drawn to it. So the point is this: people would be able to look at us and say, your God must be so amazing because of how you live. Just the way in which you live your life, your God must be so amazing. Here's the problem, honestly, in our culture that I do want you to wrestle with, especially in Bernie. Our tendency, our flesh wants to separate. We want to remove ourselves from the culture. Big thing for a long time, and even it kind of reared its head 20 years ago, but monasticism, that we would become monks and kind of separate ourselves from the culture. And once we're in these spaces where nobody can be around us, then we're going to live a pure life because we don't have the outside influence. That's not how this works. We are not to separate ourselves from the culture. We are to enter into the culture and shine the light in the darkest of places. Now, I've said this before, solitude is a good thing from the Lord. You should kind of retreat and be in the Word, but isolation is not. And Bernie, kind of those things of like we love to get our, 100 acres and churn our own butter and get our own horses and kind of separate from the world. That's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to enter in. We've been called by God right now for this place and this purpose to reach people. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. You see, while your faith is personal, God saved you. God's called you. You have a close relationship with the Lord, but your faith is not private. It's never meant to be private. It's always meant to be lived out in the context of community that others might see it. Here's what Jesus says: no one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all that are in the house. This light that we've been given is ultimately supposed to be seen. Now, it's obvious whenever you turn on the lights in a room, it's obvious that it lights up the whole room. That's what it does. And Jesus is actually using humor here. He's saying it would be ridiculous for you to to light a lamp in your room and then put a basket over it. Now, we don't have a context in that because, you have electricity most likely. But here's the way that I think about it. My grandparents lived in Snyder, Texas. If you've ever been to Snyder, Texas, you don't think this is beautiful. That's probably not what you thought. It's just not the most beautiful place in the whole world. But they lived in Snyder. They had about 150 acres, a farm. And there was this one little section of trees in that farm. And the way that my granddad built the house is that the porch would face those trees. And the cool thing about that time is they put in what's called a picture window. I'm not entirely sure how this worked, but it's the biggest glass you could possibly find. And in that living room, they put that picture window to look at that group of trees, the only trees in about a 100-mile radius, that they could look at those trees and it'd be beautiful. The thing that would be ridiculous is if they installed that picture window and sat in there for a few days and just thought, it's really too bright in here. You know what we should do? We should get blackout curtains and completely black this thing out. And then no matter what, you can't see what you hope to see, but there's no light coming in as well. This is what Jesus is saying. You have been given light. You've been saved. How ridiculous would it be if you wouldn't share that with the people around you? So for us, I think there's a lot of kind of angles that are fighting against us when it comes to shining our light. Certain baskets, let's call it. What are some baskets that keep us from shining Christ's light? Number one, does fear of man keep you from shining brightly for Jesus? Does the fear of man keep you from shining brightly for Jesus? Can I be honest? I think this is a much bigger deal than we give credit to. Being afraid of what people might think. We care so much about what other people might think and often freeze and don't do anything, become paralyzed. Don't stand out. Don't go or just go with the flow, just like everyone else is. But Proverbs tells us the fear of man will prove to be a snare. It's a trap. It's like what they trapped deer with. But the one who trusts in the Lord is protected. It's why Paul would write, am I trying to win the approval of God or for man? For our lives is to be poured out for the approval of God. I want to go to see the Lord one day and say, I've lived everything you've called me to do. And him to say, well done, good and faithful servant. Can I help you with the fear of man? I know this is hard for us. There will be people who don't like you. Y'all are going to be shocked with this. I know this will be shocking. There are people who don't like me. Me. The most winsome person. Me. You're not promised to be liked. And when you start shining the light, you know this, the darkness is not happy about the light. And when we start telling the truth in love, there will be naturally instincts from a dark world to not like the light. So your fear of man is true, and they're not always going to like you, but it's always worth to share the truth. Number 2, does pride keep you from shining brightly for Jesus? There's 2 ways I want us to see this when it comes to pride. First, you may think, I am shining brightly, and you are, but the spotlight's on you and not on him. For some reason in our silly culture where Instagram rules the world, we love to be liked. We love the approval of man. And we love to sometimes take our Christian faith and make it to where I want others to see how perfect I am, and I love the recognition for it. Light is not about you getting the approval of man. Light is to shine so that others may know who, and we'll talk about in just a minute, know who God is. The other side of pride would also say this: you won't shine brightly for Jesus because you see this. Someone else will do it. I'm just too busy. I'm not going to enter into what he's called me to do. I'm positive someone else is going to do it. I'm just too busy. Pride will also make other worldly things more important than what God's called us to. Pride can keep us from shining brightly for Jesus. Number 3, I know this is hard, but this is a good one. Does sin keep you from shining brightly for Jesus? Just active, unrepentant sin in your life. You know what that does? Active, unrepentant sin in your life will keep you in a place of hiding. It goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 3. And what sin does is it wants to stay in the darkness. And what happens is we feel this, okay, I want to live for Christ. However, if people see me living for Christ, they know who I actually am, so I'm not willing to step out in faith. Because then I will be seen as living a duplicitous life, and here's the truth: you are. And what happens is the enemy will say, well, there's nothing you can't get out of this, but that's not the truth of the gospel. The best thing that happens in our unrepentant sin is to be repentant. Lord, I lay this sin before you. I want to walk in the light. I want to walk in freedom, and he heals our lives. The best thing for us is the light in those dark places. That's where we find healing, and that's where we find freedom. James would tell us, confess your sins to one another that you might be healed. For some of you who are walking in unrepentant sin and it's just a burden on your life, you need to find somebody who loves you enough that you can be accountable to confess those sins, and you walk alongside that to be healed. Then from that place, you get to walk in open honesty, open-handedness, that you might shine the light for Jesus. Number, 4. Does comfort keep you from shining brightly for Jesus? Maybe we're far too distracted by all the shiny things in this world that it keeps us from actually shining for the right things. Maybe we have become a people who simply value the things of this world values, and we have become indistinguishable from the things of this world. Friends, I need you to know something. To follow Christ, it will certainly cost you something. It costs us everything. We give our lives to this. And friends, it's worth it. It's worth laying down our life for what Christ has done on our behalf. To live for him is absolutely worth it. Here's the thought that I just want to we're going to see this all throughout the fall, but to move the ball down the field, it will absolutely take risk on your behalf. We bring risk to every relationship to bring the gospel. We must be people of risk, being comfortable with risk. It's the whole book of Joshua. I can't wait to jump in 2 weeks. But don't put a basket over your light. Christ is shining through you. Allow him to shine through you. Here's Jesus' instruction. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. This is where it gets fun. So, how do you, your name, fill in the blank, you shine your light? It's so fun because how you shine Christ's light is as unique as your personality and your placement. Like wherever God has put you right now in your workplace, in your family, in your sphere of influence, God has put you there for a reason. So even your foursome that you play golf with, God actually put you there for a reason, to care for those who are in that group. You have to wonder, like, how do I step out in faith to actually ask some real questions? Or maybe your little Bible study, maybe you can take it to another step of actually asking real questions and bringing light to dark places, having the vulnerability to step into those things. It's as unique as your personality and your placement. See, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that you should do something. That all of us should be doing something in our sphere of influence. The big question is, where is our world lit up because you're there? How is our world becoming more bright because you're in it? That's the truth of this text. See, we're called to do good works, Jesus says. The light that we give is the good works that we do. To serve people, to love people, to walk alongside people. And here's the question that wrecked me this week, and I'm going to allow it to wreck you for the rest of your week, and it's this. Are you living a life that is compelling for an unbeliever? I'm not saying, or this question is not, are you living a life that's different? I'm saying, are you living a life that's compelling to an unbeliever? That they might see your light in your life and say, there is something here. I know this is hard, but I'm going to ask two hard questions. If nobody is coming to faith around you, have you paused to ask the question, why? Why is there no one in my life coming to faith around me? Am I just around Christians all the time? Are we all just, saved? Or do you actually have people around you who are not believers that you're pouring and investing to? If nobody has ever stepped foot in the waters of baptism because you took them there, you might want to ask the question, why? There's a novelist. I don't know how to say her name very well, but it's Madeleine L'Engle. Okay, so her quote is more impressive than how I pronounce her name, but here's what she wrote. This has been fascinating to me. We draw people to Christ not by loudly discrediting what they believe, by telling them how wrong they are and how right we are, but by showing them a light that is so lovely they want with all of their hearts to know the source of it. That's the church. That's how we reach 25,000 people or 1 billion people. We draw people to Christ not by loudly discrediting what they believe, by telling them how wrong they are and how right we are, but by showing them a light that is so lovely they want with all of their hearts to know the source of it. The thing is, you can't do this if you're not in proximity with unbelievers. You can't. So let me ask a couple questions. What if you got involved in a local school? What if you just got involved to be a godly presence wherever you find yourself, whatever school your kids go to? What if you decided to make regular visits to some nursing home around our town to bring light in some really dark places? What if you decided to mentor students in Bridge students by being a weekly volunteer every single week to pour and invest into our students? What about weekly service in Bridge Kids? We have hundreds of kids come every single week and we get to be a light in their hearts. What if you coached a team? Wherever it is you find yourself, men and women, there's coaches everywhere. And you saw your job as coaching a team. Yes, I'm going to teach them a sport, but I want to teach them about Christ. I want to be a light there. What if you led a small group? What if you really took your role as husband, wife, and parent seriously? What if you joined Bridge of Hope? What if you became a mentor for someone from Hill Country Daily Bread? What if you became intentional about inviting neighbors over to have actual meals and an actual time with actual people? What if you were sensitive to the Spirit's prompting and decided to reflect Christ's light in all of those spaces? What if we didn't seclude ourselves? What if we entered into the culture, bringing with us the light of Christ, which brings warmth and light and life? That's how we reach 25,000 people. And if we bring the light of Christ, 3,700 is too small. It's way too small. We would need 65 services a week. Or we need 30 buildings, whatever. And that's why I love to kind of consider this. Of what's going on. Whenever we start shining the light of Christ, it brings us back to the text of what is our motivation? Why would we do this? that others would look at us and give glory to God. That he is the source, that he is the one. It's why Paul, he would even say, I became a Christian, I think, is what he said. I think because others would see me and said, only God could do that. Not because of how awesome we are, because of how great our God is. He is the reason. He is the object of glory, not us. So we slowly, methodically, lovingly reach the people around us. That's how we see a gospel movement that reaches every person in the hill country and is carried to the ends of the earth. Friends, a building, although very important, is just a tool to be leveraged to reach people with the gospel, to shine the light of Christ in our area. We've been given this time, this moment in our lifetime to do this. I'm so excited to be a part of this with you. Now, from this text, I want to frame it again. I want this to be true of you. That in your sphere, you are shining Christ's light with every relationship you have. But second, I want this to be true of us corporately. I want this missional focus to be true of us. It's why we would partner with 3 missional organizations, especially those who are vulnerable in our area. I want this to be true of us as a church, that we care very deeply about what's going on out there, not just what's happening in here. And then ultimately, this is where I wanted to lead all of us. This truth, if we really believe that we want to reach people, then we will be very serious about church planting, about planting more churches. You think about our heritage. First Baptist planted Curry Creek. Curry Creek planted us. We helped plant Bergheim Christian Fellowship. The statement is this: those who believe the gospel plant churches. That's what we do. We reach more people by new churches being started. That's how it's always worked. So I want to frame this and really think about this. As we get to a new building, whatever the size is, we want to be a people who have open hands and open hearts, that we might multiply out to shine the light of Jesus all around us. I don't ever want us to become a church that gets so focused inward that we lose track of why we're here. And it's to shine the light of Jesus all around us. That's why we exist as a church. Now, why? Because Jesus Christ is the ultimate hope for every person. And though we are all sinful and our sin separates us from God, God made a way for us to be in right relationship with him again. And that way is Jesus. Through his death and resurrection, Jesus was the perfect sacrifice for our sins. And God promises that all who place their faith in Jesus Christ will be saved. This is the good news of the Bible, and this is the good news for us today. This is what we need to be reminded of today. We've been saved. We've been rescued. This light has come into our hearts. Now, it doesn't stop with us. We open our hands and open our hearts that we might shine the light to those around us.